Great, thank you, Ben. So to give a quick intro about the call, this is a monthly call where we walk through some of what's new with the Microsoft Graph. We go into depth about some of what you can do with the graph, and then we have time for Q&A at the end of each call and address your feedback and your questions. So the next call we're going to have after this one will be on February 6th. The agenda today will be introducing the presenters, doing a quick recap of what the Microsoft Graph is, walking through what's new and what's available in the Microsoft Graph, and then going through some of the user voice feedback. And then this month's technical deep dive will be on working with beta APIs in the .NET SDK. Got a lot of interest about that. Michael's going to be walking us through that. And then at the end, we'll have time for Q&A. So I'm Dimitri. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Graph team. And with me is Michael.
Hi there. This is Michael Minner. I'm an engineer on the
Can you hear us now?
No, it's all good. All good. Thank you.
Okay. I think it's coming through my laptop. I don't think it's coming through this thing.
Okay. Vesta, can you hear me right now?
Dimitri, you're absolutely fine. I think Michael started talking and then it went slightly offline. I don't know how where the microphone is right now. So.
Okay, sounds good. Audio is back. Okay, great. So I was just kind of walking through how with the Microsoft Graph, you can get access to your data and see how things are contextually related. So given a user, I can pull in their manager or like their calendar events or anything like that. And then calling the API, there's a set of standards for the API patterns. So as you're building an integration, you specify the verb for your request intent, so creating a resource, updating a resource, or deleting a resource, specify a version. There's two versions today in the public graph. There's v1.0, which is the production-ready version, and there's beta, which is always changing, and it's kind of, it's not production supported, so there might be breaking changes there. And then you specify the resource or the collection of resources, then a member from that collection. From there, you can traverse to another resource through a navigation, and you can also use optional query parameters to get exactly the data that you need. So you can say, I want to just get the data that has this property set to this value. So you can also paginate through really big collections. There's a lot of power here. One of the things I want to walk through is what's new in the graph. So it's been a bit of a, I would say, a slow month since a lot of people have been out. But we're really excited to announce that Office 365 Reports is now available in v1.0. So we have production-ready support for getting reports for Office 365 service utilization. So this is a set of APIs you can use to build really rich reporting applications where you can get a sense of how many Skype calls we're making, or what does the Yammer usage look like, or even how many emails is my organization sending. I want to give a quick demo in Graph Explorer to show you some of what you can do here. Jump over here. So I'm logged into a sample tenant, and from here, I'm going to grab this guy here. And so I can go to the reports route and then specify the particular kind of report I want to get. So in this case, it's mailbox usage detail and the period. So I want to get the past 7 days. Sorry about that.
You mute your speakers, guys.
Let me. Microphone's off. Speakers off.
Okay. Can people still hear us on the call?
Now it's all good. Now it's all good, and the video is fine as well.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
great. Thank you, Vesa. Something strange, I guess. Let me double check that. Make sure it's authenticated. But in beta, we have support for getting a JSON-based set of reports, which is pretty nice. So you can start it today. Let me run this again, double check that this works. This will give me back CSV, which I think the Graph Explorer might not be able to parse, but then I can also ask for the JSON-based version that's available in beta. And here, Graph Explorer will give me the right thing. It'll give me back. I can see each of the inboxes and then how much usage is happening in the past 7 days. So with this, you can do a lot of organization-wide reporting. You can get a bird's eye view of how is this particular service being used, and take some kind of action on that. So this is a really powerful API. We're really excited that this is in V1.0, and we really want to see what you'll build with it. Next, I want to walk through some of the user voice recommendations. So as many of you know, we have a user voice where you can submit feedback and product recommendations. So I want to address some of them. We'll read through all of them, and we're really excited to see some of what you want us to have. So one of them that we saw quite a long time ago, and we've had a number of comments underneath this thread, is having an Office 365 SDK for Java. Today, we have an SDK for Android, but we're really excited to announce that we'll have a Java SDK available later this month or early next month, and this will be a general purpose SDK for both server-side Java as well as Android. And you'll be able to build up requests to the graph in the client library. So we definitely heard you here. This is also something that we're really interested in investing in. We think this is there's a great community for Java developers, and want to make sure that they're well supported. There's some questions about MFA. So there's a couple different places where MFA is happening. So MFA is multi-factor auth. There's some APIs available in beta for enabling multi-factor auth policies, but it's fairly limited today. There's more kind of coming around the bend. So Intune has a couple. You can set up Exchange on premises, multi-factor auth policies, and as well as for connecting to Windows 10 VPNs. This is all documented in the graph documentation, but again, we're moving towards parity with what we have available in PowerShell commandlets for MSOL. There was a lot of interest in getting category colors for events, so you can render calendar events. It's now possible to fetch and update the information, the metadata about the colors for each category. So given a set of events, each event has a category, which is a string. There's an API where you can map that string back to a color that you can render. So this is a recent addition. It's available in beta today. Hopefully this will make it easier to do some of your calendar rendering scenarios. Next, we had quite a bit of feedback about returning mail headers and getting some of the detail that's only available there. This has also recently been added to beta. So if you have scenarios that require getting some additional metadata about who sent an email, this is now possible in beta. And this is also detailed in the API reference. The next piece of feedback we got was about GraphQL, and we've seen a lot of kind of a growing amount of interest in GraphQL support for the Microsoft Graph. This is something we've actively investigated, and we have a demo that I'm going to quickly show. We're looking for feedback here, and especially if you have scenarios that are particularly well suited to GraphQL, really want to hear what those scenarios are, and if you have any kinds of other use cases, we would really like to take a look there. So I'll open this up and I'll show you some of what you can do here. Let me grab this link. So this is a pre-authenticated sort of sandbox, and I can do something like I can make call for fetching a user. So this would be like the equivalent of graph.microsoft.com/v1/me. In this case, I can specify an ID, maybe a display name. And what's interesting about GraphQL is you can really specify exactly the shape of the response you're looking to get back. And the shape of the request and the shape of the response are pretty similar. So in this case, I can start pretty simple, specify just these two properties. I can run this and I can get back, this is my ID, this is my display name, Megan Bowen. And then I can expand out on resources like messages. So I have a collection of messages, and then for each message, I want to get just the subject line and whether let's say, whether I've read it. And there's some tooling available here. So Graphical, which is this sandbox client, gives you autocomplete and gives you human readable descriptions of what each property means, which is pretty cool. So if I run this, I can get back not only information about who I am, but also information about each of the email messages, their subject line, if I've read them, and I can expand this out to also include maybe the sender. So I can really cater this to exactly what my application needs and not get back more data than I require. So if a bullet request looks like this, I can expect that same shape to come back for each message. The other benefit here is if you do make requests across different endpoints, this makes it a little bit, I guess, simpler to do in one request because you can specify not only do I want to get some information about the current user, maybe I also want to get information about a different top-level resource. So in this case, let's say groups. I can make that request pretty simply by just specifying I want groups, and for each group I want the ID and the display name. So here I'm making what would otherwise be two HTTP requests, but I'm getting this back in a single transaction, which is it's pretty neat. So jumping back again, this is something that we really want to get your feedback on and hear your scenarios. We think that we're recognizing that this is becoming pretty popular in as far as APIs go. So we want to see if there's something there for that you would take advantage of, and whether this is something that we'd like to further invest in. So I'm going to switch it over to Michael, who's going to be walking through our technical deep dive, which is how to work with beta APIs in the Microsoft Graph.NET SDK.
Thank you, Dimitri. All right, folks, I'm going to go into a scenario. We've had people ask about beta client libraries. Our beta APIs are a constantly moving target, and so being able to support a rich client library experience for beta is just not in our horizon at this moment. But in the meantime, we do have, there are some ways you can use our v10 client libraries to target the beta endpoints. So to start off, this scenario, I'm going to go over the trending API. It's in beta right now, and the trending API gives some information about the artifacts that are trending around a user. So what documents, what files a user is accessing, is sharing, is being read by others. I'm not quite sure what the magic sauce is behind it, but it provides information, some analytics around what is important to a user. So, we have beta reference for the trending API, and this is actually kind of the starting place we go to kind of learn about it. So I'm going to show you how you can use the Graph Explorer to see what the trending API provides. Go back to Graph Explorer. I'm just going to sign out this user. All right, let's reload this. So Graph Explorer, we can do here, we'll go to beta, me, insights, and then trending. So Graph Explorer is aware of the beta endpoint. It understands that and loads it into its memory so that we can actually do the autocomplete there. And here we are, we get back a list of trending objects. So we have this value, this array of JSON objects here, each with some information that is trending around this user. So these are different documents on SharePoint and OneDrive that a user is accessing or is being accessed by other users in the organization. So we're going to come, you'll see more about that a little bit later in the demonstration. So, like I said earlier, we've received feedback about being able to to work with the beta API with our client library. So we're going to break this down into 3 phases. First, we're going to build our generation tool. This is what we use to generate client libraries and models, request builders for .NET and Android and soon to be Java. Phase 2 is going to be, we're going to build a beta model class library. So this will be our trending API beta model class library. And then third phase is we're going to integrate this into an existing project. So I've provided my write-up on how to do this underneath my GitHub account. And so you can follow this URL to if you wanted to follow along. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. Let's just leave that up for a little bit.
Okay.
To make sure everyone can grab that URL. And we'll have this deck available after the call. So if you want to run through this yourself, it's pretty easy to do so.
Okay. So I'm going to move forward. All right. So we are first going to clone our generation tool, and we're going to build it so that we can pass in our metadata. So okay, so we're going to first clone the MS Graph SDK code generator tool. We have to do it recursively. This repo has a submodule called Viper, and Viper is the executable that loads our metadata into memory so that it can be used by our generator in our templates. So we're going to first clone this. Good. All right. So now we're going to open up our solution. Now, because we use this tool to target multiple language platforms, one of the first things that we're going to want to do is confirm that we're targeting C# as our target language. So after this solution loads, the first thing we'll do is go into configuration. I'm going to confirm that C# is our v10 client library. We target the v10 metadata. What we're going to be doing in this trending API example is we're going to use metadata extracted from the beta metadata. So I'm going to go over here to Edge, and we'll just take a quick look at the beta metadata. So this is publicly available. You can go and peruse this. And this has got all the entities and all the types and enums that you can use to generate beta models. So the code generator, as I mentioned it, Viper loads the metadata into memory. It uses the generator and the templates along with it to output code files for our client libraries. So we've already cloned it, we've built it, we've updated the target language. We are now ready to go on to the next phase. Now we're going to generate and build our model class library. All right, so I'm going to clone. Okay, so we're going to all right, so this is the solution that that we linked to earlier. Okay, so let's talk about this repo that we just cloned. This repo contains the metadata templates that I'm going to use to generate my trending API. So I'm going to talk about metadata for a little bit. It is also going to be where we're going to output the code files that we're going to generate. And so this solution has also been pre-populated with a reference to the .NET Client Library and also JSON.NET, which we are going to need to use because we have dependencies on those in our generated beta models. All right, so let's take a look here. I have a metadata skeleton here. So this. Okay, so if you're going to be creating beta models, you're going to want to fill out this skeleton, this metadata skeleton. So the first thing you're going to need to do is in these entity sets, you're going to want to have an entity set for each one of the models that you're going to want to generate for. So in this case, we're going to have a trending entity set, and this is going to have to refer to an entity within the schema here. So we always have to have the base entity type in here. And I have a couple notes here on the to-do. You're going to make sure you want to remove all navigation properties from your entities, since we're not going to be forming relationships between entities. And to include all the structural properties referenced by your target entity. So in our example here, this is the metadata for our trending API beta models. So you can see here in our graph service entity container, we have a reference to the trending entity. Here's our trending entity. It has a base type on its base is the entity type, and we have these four properties. You can see that we commented out the navigation property, and we have to make sure that we have references to both the resource reference and resource visualization types, which we have right here. So we have this is a complete metadata document for generating our beta models. So at this point, we are ready to build our beta models. So I just want to just come back here. Just make sure that we actually built this. Looks like we did. Just make sure. Okay, so now we are ready to build our beta models. Okay, and let's see, where is my, all right. Okay, so let me just go over this really quick, this command. So we're going to use Viper exe. This is, like I mentioned earlier, is going to load our metadata into memory. Right here, this first argument is identifies our metadata trending XML, which we just went over. That contains our beta models for the trending API. The second argument, this name parameter, it's called writer, and this is always going to be the same value, graph OData template writer. And this third argument, named output, describes where we're going to output the generated models. And so we have the path to our existing SDK.NET beta models project. So we're going to run this. And if everything goes well and our metadata is fine and everything's working correctly, we will have some generated models, which it looks like we are in good shape. All right, cool. So let's go back here, back to our solution, and you'll see now we have a generated folder. And we've generated models for the trending API. Okay, and these requests. Now we can delete these requests as we are not going to be using the request builders. And we are going to delete this entity because we already have that in our graph client library. Okay, so we are now ready to build this. Okay, so now we have a built DLL with the trending beta API models. So now we need to now we want to integrate this into an existing application. So let's clone our existing application. Okay, while that clones, kind of skipping ahead, folks, sorry about that. So we've generated our beta models. We have a DLL with our trending API model sitting in it. So we're now, I've just cloned this C# console connect sample. This is an existing sample available on the Microsoft Graph organization on GitHub. Now we just need to update this sample to use our beta models. Where are we? Okay. All right, the first thing we're going to need to do is get a client ID. Actually, I'm just going to cheat here. Check out final.
And so the Connect sample we're showing it's the same as the Connect sample that's available on the Microsoft Graph organization's GitHub. It's I think it's also the same one as the quick start sample.
I believe so. Now, mind you, I forked it and I've made some minor changes to it. So, but it is more or less the same sample. So let me go over here to constants, grab this. I'm cheating here, grabbing the client ID out of the final version of this. Okay, so first thing we need to do is add our client ID to our authentication to our constants file. In our authentication helper, we need to add our scope for the to enable the trending API. So sites.read.all.
And a quick note: the client ID and the application ID are kind of the same thing. So when you go to the apps registration portal, it'll show you an app ID. That's the same as a client ID. So once you get that, you can copy that into the Connect sample.
All right, so I want to get rid of these squiggly lines. So let me just build this and restore those NuGet packages. Okay, so now we need to add a reference to our beta our beta model client library. Here it is right here. So once we've added that, we need to update the properties on this. So we're going to add an alias for this library, and the reason being is we have two libraries providing objects in the same namespace, and we want to be able to say which one we're going to use. So now that we've added that, we need to add the extern alias directive for this. Okay, at this point, we are now able to add our code that will allow us to use our beta model. So at this point, let's do that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add our request message. So here we've hard-coded a URL to the trending API endpoint and use that to create our request message. So one of the niceties here is that we're able to reuse our graph client we use for the v10 endpoint. So you can see a little further up here in the code file, we're getting an authenticated graph client, and we're making a call to the v10 endpoint. We'll be able to use the same client to make a call to the beta endpoint as well and get an authenticated, get our token injected into the client. So here we are, we're going to send the request. We're going to send our request message that we created and get back a response. And now we're going to get that trending object. So you can recall in Graph Explorer, we got back an array of JSON objects. Those were those trending objects. And so what we need to do is we need to get that array, and we get that by using the value key. So let me just go back to Graph Explorer really quick. And yeah, you'll see here's that value key to the array of our trending objects. Okay, so now that we've got that array of trending objects, we're going to access those. And so, hold on here. Let's see what I call it. Called it global metadata. Okay, let's see what I do. Ah, there we go. I used the wrong alias. Okay.
And so to have kind of a quick explanation of why we saw the error, when we added the reference to the DLL, we put an alias for it, and we want to make sure that alias is the alias that we're using to prefix all of the Microsoft.graph resources that we're using from the DLL to distinguish it from the ones that are in the official .NET SDK.
Thank you, Dimitri. Okay, so here we are. We're getting a handle on the each one of those objects in the array of the array of trending objects, and we're deserializing that into our trending beta model. And then here, finally, we're going to show the trending information. And let me just add this here, and let's run it. Okay, so it's going to prompt me for my credentials. All right, it went out, made the call using the v10 API to get my username, and then I'm going to push any key, and then it went out and got the beta API information from the beta trending endpoint. And so this is all the different items that are trending around this user. Thank you. That's the demo.
Yeah, and if you have any questions or if you want to kind of go slower through what we just presented, we'll have a video of this recording, so you can kind of do this at your own pace. And Michael has a great write-up available on his GitHub that we'll link to also in the deck. Again, if you have questions, you can submit them in the chat, and we can address them, I guess, at the end of the call. If any of that kind of went by a little too fast or if something didn't make sense, please let us know. So the next thing I want to go into is just recognizing all of the work that folks in the community have done. There's a lot of great blog posts and videos that came out in the past month. So both Tom Baginski and John Vidar Elvin wrote blog posts about how to use Microsoft Graph inside of Power Apps and Flow, how to build custom connectors for those integrations. Bo Cameron wrote how to make a graph-powered Clippy. This one was really cool. It was resurrecting a familiar digital assistant that's backed by the Microsoft Graph. Andrew Connell has a video on how to use Delta queries in the Microsoft Graph. So this is for state management where you want to get back just the changes on a resource or a collection of resources over a period of time. Ashish Trivedi wrote about choosing the right API for graph development for different Office 365 services. And then Tom Morgan wrote about accessing Microsoft Teams usage data in code using the graph. And Sutahar wrote about Xamarin and how to integrate the Microsoft Graph API into a Xamarin Forms application. This is all great stuff. I encourage everybody to look through and check out some of this content. There's a lot of cool new capabilities and walkthroughs of how to make use of the Microsoft Graph in your own solutions. So after this slide, we're going to jump to the Q&A, but I wanted to just say thank you for everybody that made this call. I know that January 2nd is it's pretty early. Like a lot of people are still out on vacation, so it really means a lot. We'll have the recording available on the Office Dev YouTube, so you can go back and run through Michael's presentation demo or any of the other things we presented. And the next call will be available on February 6th, so the first Tuesday of February. And you can submit your questions today for the next call, and this is a link for adding the series to your calendar. So I'm going to hop over, and we're going to stop the recording and go through Q&A.